Welcome to City Church's On Demand Messages. My name is Josh, and we're so glad you're tuning in whenever and wherever you're tuning in from. In fact, if it's your first time, we'd love to connect with you. You can text new to the number on the screen right now. We've got a free gift for you. Also, if you need prayer, we would love to pray with you. We believe that prayer is not our last resort, but it is our first response to what is going on in our lives and the lives of those around us. And so we'd love to join in with you. And so you can text next to the number on the screen. Also, if you'd like to invest financially into the mission of City Church to be a Jesus movement that awakens the soul in the city, you can text next as well to the number on the screen. We believe every Sunday morning when we gather in person and online, and we open up God's Word, that He has something special and specific for every one of us. And so as we lean into this week's message that you're about to watch, we pray that God opens up your heart to whatever He has for you, and we hope that you are encouraged by today's message. Again, if we can do anything for you, please let us know. Amen. Hey, can we give God one more round of applause? You're having a seat. Absolutely. Yes, yes. Well, good morning. My name is Josh. I'm one of the pastors here, and just so excited that you're here with us this morning. If it's your first time, welcome. If you've been coming for a while, welcome. I'm just excited about this morning for so many reasons. One of those reasons, and then I'm gonna share some things, and I want to jump into the message this morning. But one of the things that God is doing right now, just in our midst, is about 3 months, actually about 6 months ago. God just allowed us to kind of stumble upon this property, close on this new property. Right now, we rent this space, and it's been a great home for us, and it'll continue to be a great home for us for about the next 12 months. But God just had something new for us, something special for us. And so if it's your first time here, we just thought this morning, as we're moving into, you're going to hear the word "here to stay" a lot this morning. But as we're kind of moving into this, if it's your first time, you've been coming for a little while, we made it a big announcement on our birthday Sunday, which was about a month ago. And so we're a 3-year-old church. And on birthday Sunday, we made a big announcement. But we understand, too, that some of us weren't here. Some of us weren't a part of that. Or you just started coming maybe for the first time or a few weeks ago. And you're like, I keep hearing this stuff, but I don't know exactly what you're talking about. And so we thought that we would just kind of bring you into it by showing you just a quick video. So check this out. March 17th, 2019, we began on a journey of inviting people into a space off of 1941 to worship, to gather, and to meet Jesus. But this movement didn't begin in 2019. In March of 2017, I pulled into this parking lot for the very first time. It was in a season in our life where we felt like God may be calling us into something new, calling us out of where we were into something fresh, and to start something new and potentially start a church. And so in this parking lot, for the next 3 months, almost every day, I would pull in and I would park and I would just sit and bring my questions and my fears and my worries and my doubts, my frustrations, my laughter, my tears, and if you know me, it was a whole lot of tears. And I would bring them to God, and He would meet me here. And ultimately, over those 3 months, God would take those moments and turn them into a movement in my life. A movement that would ultimately lead us to start and be a part of planting a church that is for Jesus, for all people, and for our city. A Jesus movement that awakens the soul in the city. And about a year after those moments in this parking lot, we would have our first movie in the park, about a block behind me, and see the beautiful diversity of our city, where people from different walks of life and past and different colors of skin and age would all come together and celebrate. It was this incredible moment where we got to experience just what God was beginning to do. And from movies in the park to mentoring at Orrs Elementary and investing in that school wholeheartedly, we've seen God do immeasurably more to this past year starting and launching Spalding United Youth Basketball, where we've invested in the next generation in our county through recreation basketball. From there to investing in numerous events in our city and investing in caring and encouraging the leadership and the businesses of our city, we love Griffin and secretly have always prayed, God, would you bring us back downtown? We have always said and believe with our whole hearts that, God, whenever and wherever you move, we want to follow. Over the last few years, as we've invested in our city and we've seen this Jesus movement grow, we knew that one of the next steps for us was a new location. And so over the last year, we've been praying and looking and honestly haven't found really anything until one day, in a way that only God could set up, we met someone that would tell us about the property that we stand on right now. A 45,000 square foot property in the middle of downtown, right across the street from where we have done movies in the park. And now the property that I stand on is not some random property for sale in 2017. It is now a property that God has entrusted to us, to City Church, to own and ultimately to give back to Him. And the same property that I would come to God in 2017 and bring all I had to Him, we now get to invite everyone and anyone in our city and surrounding to meet with God, to bring their fears, their hopes, their dreams, their pain, their questions, their frustration to Him, that He would take their moments and turn them into a movement in their lives, that they would leave this place having met with Jesus to transform their families, their homes, their neighborhoods, their workplaces, and ultimately this city. This is where we move from renting to owning, where we dig our roots deep and tell our city we aren't going anywhere. City Church, we are here to stay.
So it's cool. I mean, you see that again, and you're like, it literally is only God. Like, it's just God. Like, we can't even take any credit. We don't want to take. It's just God. And so, like, we've got a long journey ahead of us when it comes to that property. And some of you saw this, and you're like, worship at the building night is gonna be ready. It ain't ready one bit. So just so you know. One of the cool opportunities is that we had the opportunity we purchased the building, and right now as it stands, when we move into that building, we can pay half of what we pay to rent this space here for like 3 times as much square footage, all these things. It's incredible, but we would need to pay cash for the renovations, which is about $750K. And so what we're praying right now is that God would bring that in, and we're really excited about what He's already doing and all those things. And so we got a journey ahead of us. For sure, but God's going to do it, and we're so excited about it. And so what we thought is tonight at 5 o'clock is that we would just have worship and celebration at the building, that He's even kind of led us to this space so far. And so at 5 o'clock tonight, you saw the card. There's a website that kind of gives you directions and instructions and everything. But 5 o'clock tonight, let me see that, Dozy, real fast. Thank you, sir. So you see this card, and it's got the address. Show up 5 o'clock tonight. It is a bring your own chair. Y'all like, wait, where are you going with this? Bring your own chair. Bring your own chair event. And so that means if you want to sit, bring a camping chair. We'll have a few out there, but if anybody forgets them, but don't bank on that. Bring your own chairs if you want to. It'll be a family kind of gathering. And so we're just going to sing some songs. We're going to pray and then have a next step that I'm really excited about. That's going to be super cool. And so 5 o'clock tonight, we'll have hot dogs there. Ice cream truck will be there. It's just going to be a time to sing, to thank God for what He's done, and then to look ahead at what He's going to do. And so please, if it's like your first time, you're like, am I allowed? Absolutely. And if you got people here, if you're here and you're like, I want to invite my friend, but they're not a part of our church, can they come? Absolutely. Anybody can come. And so we'd love to see you here, or love to, don't come here, we won't be here. Love to see you at 220 East Solomon Street tonight at 5 o'clock. So I'm really excited about it. Also, just a little, one more thing I'd ask of you, wear sunglasses. Just wear sunglasses. When you get there, you'll know why. But it's just bright at that time of day. And we were like, maybe we could push it to 6, and we stood out in the parking lot. Like, nope, still bright. And so it'll be a little warm, but I'll be all right. But bring sunglasses. If not, you're going to be just, maybe wear a hat too. If you got a hat, wear a hat. You're going to be doing this a lot, which you can do. That's fine. But wear sunglasses. So really excited about it. All right, let's jump into the series we've been in, Here to Stay. So you saw it at the end of that video, but I just believe this. I believe that there is something powerful when we look somebody in the face and we say, hey, I know what you've done, but I'm here to stay. Like, I love you. I know what I could do, but I'm here to stay. I think there's something powerful in our city when God's church, when they say, hey, no matter how ugly it gets or no matter how great it gets, we're not going anywhere. Like, we're here to stay. Like, we believe that our city needs the staying power presence of Jesus' church. And so what we said is, if we're here to stay, that means a couple things for us. And so the first thing is this, is if I'm saying I'm here to stay, then that means that I'm here to serve. And so in your marriage, in your relationships, it's to say, like, my mentality has to be, if I'm in this thing, that I'm here to serve you. In your friendships, in your working relationships, with your enemies, with the coworker that's super lazy, right? I'm here to serve you. We said the next thing is that we're here to give. And so we believe that God entrusts everything to us. So our talents, our abilities, our passions, and also our finances to give back and invest in Him and in His kingdom. And so we asked a simple question: with what God has entrusted to you financially, are you investing in a current economy or are you investing in an eternal economy? Like, what we mean by that is, are the things that you're investing with, when you die, will they just go to the grave with you and then they don't go any further? Are you investing in things that will go long beyond our lifetime? And so we talked about we're here to give, we're here to serve, and today I'm going to kind of wrap it up. Next week we're going to have this moment in this special Sunday where we're just here to worship, but today I want to talk about this idea that if we're here to stay, that means we're here to serve, we're here to give, and we're also here to obey. Now, if you're like me, I'm type A. If you're Enneagram at all, I'm an Enneagram 8. So that means I'm bossy and I like control. And so when you use the word obey, I'm like, nah, I'm good. And here's a couple reasons why. The first reason why is when I think of you telling me to obey, I already know that I can think of 3 better ways to do that thing than you're telling me about how to do it, right? Anybody here? You nudging anybody? Okay, just a couple people honest. Thank you so much. Yeah. Nudging somebody? Yes, sir. Okay, so like that's me. Like when you tell me to obey, I'm like, nah, bro. Like, I'm going to tell you to obey, like, because you're going to say, hey, I need you to do this. I'm like, no. I need you to do it this way. Like that's my mentality. Now, some of us are just like, yes, I'm here to obey. I'm here to serve, whatever you need. God bless you. I just don't have it in me. And I would imagine that there is no one on this side of the earth that is completely there. Like, I'm here to obey. Like, I'm just a humble servant. I'll do whatever you tell me to do anytime. I'm here to obey. Like, at some point, it pushes against us. It rubs us the wrong way. Or maybe you've had this experience with God, is you've said, okay, God, I'll obey you, and it just didn't go all the way you planned. And things didn't go the way you wanted them to. And you're like, well, God, obeying you clearly doesn't work for me, so I'm going to do it my own way. Whatever you fall in that, maybe you've never tried to obey God, and you're just here. It doesn't really matter to me. I think that there's something to this when we say, if we're here to stay, if we're here to be a part of this thing, if we're here to be a part of Jesus' church, maybe, and we're not experiencing the presence of God, maybe it's because we haven't fully walked into obedience with Him. Like, if we're like, God, sometimes I don't feel you, I don't experience it. Like, God, there's times I just don't feel like you're around. God, there's times when, like, I feel like I'm supposed to go this direction and it doesn't work out. Where are you right now? Maybe we've just given up on this idea of obedience because we live in a culture that doesn't want to obey at all. Like, let me do it my way, like my truth. Like, let me do it the way that I see fit, right? But what if a better way unlocked miracles? What if there was a better way that unlocked freedom? What if there's a better way that unlocked revival and a movement in your home, in your life, and in this city? So let's lean in. Let's see what God's Word has to say. So I'm going to be in Acts chapter 5 this morning. You can go there. So just a little context here. So Jesus has come. He's died on the cross for our sins. He's resurrected, and He has set His church in motion. And they didn't call themselves a church. It was just this movement that He set in motion. And so they're seeing these amazing things happen. Like one day, Peter and John they're walking along the road, and there's this man that's been crippled for 40 years. And they literally say, get up and walk. And he walks. I mean, like, these miracles are happening, breaking out everywhere, right? To the point that people, when Peter would walk through the streets, they would drag out their lame and their sick and lay them on the ground just so that his shadow could fall on them, because they believed that Peter's shadow would heal them because God was working through them that much. Now, to some people, this was amazing, and to other people, this really ticked them off. There were these religious officials and the people that that said that they were part of God and they were following God and they were obeying God, but they just didn't like what was happening. And they didn't like the fact that these apostles, these disciples, these people who had followed Jesus and started his church were getting this notoriety and were almost becoming famous in their eyes. And so here's what happens. Acts chapter 5, verse 17, it says this, "But the high priest rose up and all who were with him, that is the party of the Sadducees, and filled with jealousy," verse 18, "they arrested the apostles and put them in public prison." So get this, God is moving, he's working, they're seeing these miracles happen, and what happens? They get thrown into prison. Like, so God, we're following you, we're obeying you, we're doing what you tell us to do, we're going where you tell us to go, we're listening, God, we're leaning into you, and you're doing these amazing things, and then all of a sudden they throw them into prison. Have you ever had a prison moment? Maybe not an actual prison, maybe an actual prison, I don't know. But have you ever had that moment where things were going really well, and then all of a sudden, like opposition struck? It set in. All of a sudden, like I was going so well, I was moving forward so well, and then life just got hard. Something got difficult. I think we have to understand that when we choose to obey God, it's usually going to involve opposition. I mean, this is the apostles. This is their second time in jail. I mean, let's just be honest. Like many of us, we want a cheat code in life. Like we want this cheat code of like, if I do this, then all this stuff works out for me, right? And so some of us believe that if I just follow God, if I just obey God, if I obey Jesus, then my life will go great, right? Like I'll get that job. I'll finally get married. I'll never get sick again. I'm going to make straight A's. My bank account is going to be full. And it just doesn't work out that way. So we get frustrated and say, God, I'm doing what you want me to do. So why are you not doing for me what I want you to do? I read this and thought it was so good. If you're not ready to face opposition for your obedience, you may not be ready to be used by God. Like if we're not ready to be to face opposition when we say yes to God, then we might, just to be honest, we may not be ready to be used by God. There may be something more that he has to do in our hearts. Because I know this, in my life, every significant act of obedience has been met with opposition. So when I was in college, I got a full ride scholarship to play Division II basketball. And about 8 months into that school year, I felt like God was calling me to go to a Christian college. And so what that meant was I was going from getting paid to play basketball and getting like a check, and I had a free apartment, all this stuff, food. I had shoes. Like it was just a great deal, right? I was getting a check at the end of the month for expenses, all this stuff. And I went to my parents and said, Mom, Dad, I feel like God's calling me to go to a Christian college. And they're like, well, what does a scholarship look like? I was like, there is none. And they're like, excuse me, now my parents are amazing, they're great, but like the practical side of them was like, what are we doing right now? Like, how is this going to happen? And so I remember like there was opposition, there was that pushback, and eventually they're like, okay, this is what God's calling to do, then let's do this, but they didn't know why. So I went there to Toccoa Falls, and I began to play basketball there, and about 2 months in, my back started hurting, and long story short, I found out I had the back of an 80-year-old woman. Like literally the doctors and orthopedics, like professional people were like, hey, you have your grandma's back. Which tells me if you are here and you've got a bad back or you are a grandma, we have more in common than you think. But I had this moment like, God, I want to play basketball. I went to this place because I felt like you were calling me to go play basketball. And then literally the doctors say, because I was like, well, what do I do? How do I fix this? And they're like, you don't fix this. You just stop playing basketball. I mean, all I've ever done in my life at this point was play basketball and been decent at it, not good even, but decent at it. And so that became my identity. And so now this thing was stripped away from me. I'm like, God, what are you doing? Why would you move me out of a college where I was getting paid to play, and you move me to this place and then to play basketball? Now I'm paying to play basketball, and all of a sudden you rip that out for money. What are you even doing right now? I remember the last week of that my sophomore year at the school, which was my first year at Toccoa Falls. I ended up being in a bed and being pulled out on a stretcher because I decided to keep playing basketball, and I blew out my back to the point where I couldn't walk anymore. And I kept thinking, God, why? Why? Like, I thought I was doing what you wanted me to do. In that season, about a month beforehand, I felt this call on ministry on my life. I was like, God, maybe it's ministry. Maybe that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm not supposed to be a coach or a teacher. Or like, maybe I'm just supposed to be a pastor and be in ministry, and all of a sudden my back blows out. I'm like, God, why are you doing all this? Well, if I wouldn't have gone to Toccoa Falls College, and if I wouldn't have, I guess, pushed through those things and saw those things, I never would have met my wife. I never would have got the internship that I did that called me to student ministry, that ultimately called me to plant a church. Like, when you start looking at all these things, like every significant act of obedience in my life has been met with opposition. When we decided to plant a church, I had one of my best friends say, "Why would you plant a church in Griffin? Things only go to Griffin to die." I'm like, "Thanks, buddy. Thanks." Type A was like, "Let's go." But I remember that. I remember getting a call from a pastor saying, "Who do you think you are and what do you think you're doing in Griffin?" I remember saying, "Okay, we want to be this, like God's called us to be this church that's diverse, that reflects the diversity of our city." So that means old and young and age, and that means race, black and white, Hispanic, like to reflect the beauty of our city. In the first 6 months, someone left and said, "We're leaving because we're tired of hearing about black people." To which I said, "We're really going to tick you off even more if you keep hanging around, so maybe that's the right call." Like, every significant act has always been met with opposition. I mean, even just stepping into this season of taking these steps towards building and these new ministries and Spalding United basketball, all these things, like the opposition, I mean, it's been a lot. Like a year and a half ago, like just started walking through some severe anxiety and even stage anxiety. Like, preached for 15 years, been on stage for 15 years, and then all of a sudden, like, I just start feeling like, and I'll be honest, it's ongoing. It's a weekly, like, I feel it every Sunday. And it's just like the opposition. But you know it, right? You know what it's like to try to be faithful and do what God's told you to do, and you just face a really difficult circumstance. You know what it's like to start taking steps. And maybe it was a massive, like, I've called a minister. Maybe it was just like, I'm going to wake up this morning and go to church. And you know the opposition, whether it was like the kids that were like, "I don't want to wear that," or it was something greater, the car broke down, or it was just like you just felt attacked this morning. Like, you know. So the question is, what do we do? Man, all throughout the Bible, it tells us like how obedience and opposition, how they play together. Like, check out some of these passages. Romans 5:3 says, "And not only this, but we also exult in our tribulations or our trials, knowing that our tribulation brings about perseverance." Another passage is Matthew 5:12. "Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is in heaven for you. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." So Jesus is saying to them, hey, rejoice and be glad when you experience opposition, because it's the same thing that everyone has experienced who's tried to take steps towards Jesus. At the end, this is a spoiler alert for the story we're in, but Acts 5, that's kind of light, so you might have to squint a little bit. I'm getting you ready for this afternoon at 5, right? Squint. "So they went on their way from the presence of the council, rejoicing that they had been considered worthy to suffer shame for his name," for Jesus' name. We have another one in the Bible as well. It's James 1:2. It says, "Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness." And there's more. "Yes, and all who desire," this is the one that I'm like, really? "All who desire to live godly in Christ Jesus will suffer persecution." So the question is, what do you do when you face opposition? I think we just aren't surprised by it. Imagine that, like, we're not surprised by it. Because moving forward for God is an open invitation for pushback from the enemy. Like, when you try to take steps towards God and forward for God, it's an open invitation, right? Like, welcome to church. This is I'm sorry, I'm not going to mince my words. Like, when we see story after story from all throughout here, where men and women decided that they were going to follow Jesus, and it was never an easy path. It was never a clear path. There was always opposition. So instead of being surprised by it, what if we were just like, this is just part of the journey, right? It's just part of the journey. But what if there's more? Verse 19, "But during the night," so they're in prison, "an angel of the Lord opened the prison doors and brought them out." So what we see is this, and we see this all throughout the Bible, is that God's miracles often follow our obedience. Now, let me be very careful with that. God's miracles don't wait for our obedience. Like, God's not waiting around to perform a miracle for us to obey. But what we see is that God's miracles often follow our obedience. So when we walk in obedience to God, you may not know when or how, but we believe that God will come through. So they're just chilling in prison, right? And all of a sudden an angel shows up, pops open the doors, and they just get out. Like this miracle happens in their midst. And Luke, I mean, as they're writing, as Luke's writing in the book of Acts, he doesn't even like put exclamations point. He's just like, they were hanging out, and they, you know what God does. It's just an angel pops up, he opens the doors, and they're free. It's just like you begin to expect it. Like we have no idea what God might set into motion through one single act of obedience. And yes, you may face opposition, but what if a miracle is on the other side of the opposition? I know that it may be difficult. I'm not trying to minimize anybody's situation that you're going through. But what if? In the same way we see all throughout the stories about what if a miracle is on the other side of the opposition? What if breakthrough is on the other side of the opposition? What if something greater is at play? About 3 years ago, I met a woman named Joan. And Joan started coming to our church. And this was pre-COVID. This is the first year of our church. And every Sunday, Joan would come up to me and she would say, hey, I just want you to know, I stopped doing this today. Like, I've been a week without, sober from this or whatever else. Like, she just started walking through these things. She's like, I just stop doing this. And then, like, a month later, just every week, like, I would just kind of stand here and be like, where's Joan? Like, I loved it. And about a month in, she came to me and she said, I think it's time for me to be baptized. And so this was the picture. I promise that's like an exciting face. She's like, what's wrong with your face? No. This is a picture of Joan getting baptized 3 years ago. Now, her life, it's been amazing to see how Jesus has transformed her life. I mean, from just showing up and being a part of this and listening and taking steps to sitting down and asking, like, hey, so, like, what's our 5-year plan for discipleship? Like, I mean, like, that kind of stuff, right? Like, I love it. But she's also faced a ton of opposition, heart problems in the hospital during COVID. Like, there was all of these things that it would have been easy. It would have been easy. And probably many of us wouldn't have blamed her just to bow out and just say, you know what? Do whatever you need to do. It would be easy to just say, hey, just figure it out on your own. Don't worry about God. Like we totally, like just a lot, so many things. And Joan, like I remember talking to her on the phone because that's all we could do. And in the hospital, and I'll be like, hey, how are you doing? She's like, I'm good. Like, and she would say like, hey, this is part of the journey, right? I was like, oh my gosh, it's so mature. Why don't I think like that? So about a month ago, this is a picture of her grandson being baptized. And this is Joan and his uncle. And the parents were like, they're not in the picture, but they're there as well. And when you see this picture three years later, like when someone comes to make a decision to follow Jesus and be baptized, that's a miracle. Like I think sometimes we think, oh, doors got to open, angels got to show up, pop doors open. I mean, yes, miracle, but miracle. And how amazing is it that she gets to be right here? I mean, in tears, right? And her whole thought is like, God's just been faithful. He's been faithful. He's been faithful. A miracle was on the other side of her opposition. What if our lives look like this? That we just believe that God, whatever's happening, whatever's in front of me, like there's something on the other side of this. And I don't know what it is, and I don't know when you're going to come through, and I don't know how you're going to come through. Like I'm not even going to put that on you, God, but I know that a miracle's on the other side of this. Like you're going to be faithful and you're going to be glorified. So they get broken out of prison, verse 20, and then he says, go and stand in the temple and speak to the people all the words of this life. I love this, how he says this life, by the way, but man, so now we see this, like, okay, so God busts open the doors, the angel comes, and he says, okay, now I want you to go right back to where you were before and do the exact same thing you were doing before, and let's see what happens. I mean, can you imagine that? Like, think, God, okay, don't you want me to like flee for a little while? Like things are a little dicey right now. Like that didn't feel great to get thrown in prison. He's like, no, just go back there. I think obedience, obedience leads to miracles. It involves opposition, and it also requires faith. You see, we think we can handle all the details. God, tell me what's coming in a few weeks. God, tell me what's coming tomorrow. Tell me what's coming in a few months. But we honestly can't. If you actually knew what was coming tomorrow or next week, some of us wouldn't get out of bed. Can we just be honest? If God would have told me 3 years ago, hey, plant a church, you're going to plant a church through a pandemic, and you're going to go online for you, and you're going to have to deal with, like loss and heartache, but also leading a church through this time, like all these divisive things. If he would have told me that 4 years ago, I hope I would have had the faith to plant the church. But can I just be honest? If I would have known that, like, whew, we said, God, tell me all of it. We can't handle that. Like, just be honest. If you knew what was going to happen this week, a week ago, you wouldn't have you would have locked the door and be like, nope, not happening. Because God's grace comes one day at a time. Which tells me this. When we talk about obedience is on us, but the outcome is on God. So obedience is on us. So God says, hey, go back to that place. Okay, that's it. That's what we're going to do. So verse 21, when they heard this, they entered the temple at daybreak and began to teach. Like, we're just doing this thing. They didn't delay. They obeyed God completely and immediately. I saw one pastor put this, and I loved it, that delayed obedience is disobedience, and partial obedience is disobedience. They went fully in. So how does this story end? The high priest called the Sanhedrin and said, hey, go get those disciples. And they go to the jail, and they're not there. And I'm like, whoa, what's happening? And so they send the guards out, and the guards find them back in the temple preaching. Verse 27, and when they had brought them, they set them before the council. And the high priest questioned them, saying, we strictly charged you not to teach in this name. Yet there you have filled Jerusalem with your teaching. And you intend to bring this man's blood upon us. But Peter and the apostles answered, we must obey God rather than men. I mean, we must obey God rather than men. I mean, the faith that takes to stand there, to look their lives in the face and say, we could lose our lives over this. And they look them in the face and say, we must obey God rather than men. All cards on the table, it's my prayer. The Spirit of God would speak to you today, and your response will be yes. I can't obey men. I've got to obey God. So whether that's like you're here and you showed up for the first time, you're like, I'm just giving this church thing a chance, but like you made that first step. And maybe that next yes is like, I'm just going to lock in and I'm going to lean into this. Maybe I'm going to start serving. Maybe I'm going to start giving. I don't know, but I will say this, that you and I have no idea what God may do through one single act of obedience. What God did with Joan of just showing up one Sunday leading to this 3 years later, I mean, that's amazing. I think we don't know what God can do through one single act of obedience. I think we have no idea what he might do through repeated acts of obedience. Because ultimately, obedience is giving our full yes to God. Our full yes. It's not just giving our yes to God. Like, there's been many moments in my life where God said, do this, and I said, okay, God, I'll do it, and I never did it. So when I say the full yes, I mean the full yes. So like my yes, you get my, okay, I'll do this, but you also get my actions, you get my steps, you get my full obedience. Obedience is giving God our full yes. And I think it has to help us understand, or we got to understand that our yes to God may mean yes to something or someone else. So it may mean, yes, God, I'm going to follow you. So that may mean yes to that job. It may mean yes to that move. It may be yes to just, I'm staying put. But I think we've also got to understand that a yes to God may mean no to someone or something else. So it may mean a no to that person you're in a relationship with, and you're dating or you're engaged, like, man, but you know God's saying this isn't right. The relationship, whatever it is, like the temptation, whatever you're walking in, like whatever it is, like it's saying, yes, God, I'm going to obey you fully. And what that's going to mean is saying no to that person. And saying this isn't the right relationship. I'm saying dating and engaged. Maybe for you, though, it's marriage. And for you, God's saying, yes, you need to obey me, you need to serve. And so you've been thinking that like your next step is to get out of the marriage. And God's saying, no, it means you're staying. Like you're here to stay. It's not an option. We're here to stay. Maybe a yes to God is going to mean no to an addiction. So it's saying no to pornography. It's saying no to alcohol or the drugs. It's saying no to the shopping. I don't know. But a yes to God is saying no to something else. Like I've been praying through, okay, God, what would you have our family, or we've been praying through, God, what would you have our family give towards the renovations? And I know this. I know a yes to the amount that he's calling us to give is going to mean a no to a lot of things. Y'all, this may seem silly to some. I love sneakers. It's just, I had a conversation with Dozy about this on Friday. Like, it means a no. It means a no to that. Like, some of those things that, like, don't really matter. It means a no to. For some of us, the investing in eternity, or just even getting a hold of our finances, saying, God, we want to be faithful and obey you with our finances, just in general is going to mean a no to that spending, or a no to that credit card debt, or whatever it is. I don't know. And this is the beautiful thing about, I don't have to know. But I just need us to know that if we're going to give God our full yes, which I think is what he's calling us to do, then it's going to be a no to some things. And we've got to be okay with that. I mean, what would it look like if we gave God our yes and then just trusted him with the rest? God, I'm going to give you my full yes. And whatever comes tomorrow, you're going to have the grace and the power for me to walk through that tomorrow. But I'm giving you my full yes today. And tomorrow I'm going to wake up and say, you got the full yes, God. I'm here to obey. And imagine what our lives could look like. Let's pray. God, thank you. Thank you for loving us. Thank you for sending Jesus to die for us. Thank you for, God, thank you for allowing him and giving him the power, you the power to resurrect and conquer the grave. So God, this morning, the areas that we've been pushing back, or God, the areas where we felt pushed back from the enemy, God, would you just give us the strength and the power to walk in them, to step in them, God, fully, wholeheartedly, trusting you with everything we've got.